Hello, I'm Nathan Loynes, and today we're going to explore overdiagnosis in mental health. In creating the video, I've drawn on the 7 sources that you can see on the screen. You can pause this. When I've drawn upon a particular source, I've included that reference on the relevant slide in front of you, the relevant screen in front of you. To keep a video to a minimum of time length, I'm not going to mention the authors, but if you do want to cite these particular authors or look into their findings in more detail, that's the source where they come from. So our aims for today are to define the term overdiagnosis and distinguish it from other terms such as misdiagnosis, to apply overdiagnosis and misdiagnosis to the field of mental health, to point out some of the societal and individual consequences of overdiagnosis/misdiagnosis, to distinguish overdetection from overdefinition in trends of overdiagnosis and misdiagnosis, and to identify some of the limitations in the research literature regarding purported studies into overdiagnosis. Adamson states in 1924 that overdiagnosis of any sort is bad for the patient physically, financially, and psychically. It's bad for the physician mentally and morally, and it's bad for the country economically. So that sets the scene way back nearly 100 years ago, the problem of diagnosis as it was known, how it affects the individual, the clinician, and society in general. One significant issue with measuring and explaining overdiagnosis is that it affects individual cases, but we can only assess and understand it when looking at the overall picture or groups of people. And we know this as the study of epidemiology. Studying the prevalence of disease and things like mental health issues within a society is within the realm of epidemiology. So building on Adamson's nearly 100-year-old definition of the problem, here's a more up-to-date source exploring what is the problem with overdiagnosis in medicine in general. Overdiagnosis is the identification of a medical condition that, if left undiagnosed, would not lead to symptoms or harm the patient over their lifetime. And it is now more widely recognised, especially in the context of cancer and other screenings. Given that preventative healthcare plays a vital role in primary care, which serves a wide-ranging population, overdiagnosis in primary care holds significant public health implications and is a pressing issue. The concept of overdiagnosis in primary care highlights the need to carefully balance the benefits and potential harms associated with preventative screenings and interventions, recognising the broader societal impact. Essentially what Adamson said 99 years ago. So why does overdiagnosis happen? Overdiagnosis poses risks to patients by potentially subjecting them to unnecessary treatments, which may have associated side effects, as well as causing anxiety and depression due to the diagnosis. Oh no, I've been labelled with this thing, and that's scary in itself. And the burden of medical expenses, and in this country, time on behalf of the patient. Various factors contribute to the problem of overdiagnosis, such as the increased reliance on advanced diagnostic tools, financial incentives for healthcare providers, a medical culture that promotes extensive testing and treatment, limited evidence hindering the assessment of diagnostic value, and the use of screenings that don't provide clear benefits, and also, in terms of definition, an expansion in recent years of disease definitions. Let's separate overdiagnosis from overmedicalization. Overdiagnosis and overmedicalization are frequently confused due to them having similar meanings, and they share common themes, concepts, and causative factors. However, overmedicalization involves the redefinition of a normal human experience as a medical condition and its subsequent treatment as such. So, for example, I made reference to having restless legs and how restless legs, or maybe over caffeine consumption we discussed in class, causes restless legs, and it's not actually a medical condition. This phenomenon leads to a similar outcomes as overdiagnosis, including labelling, overtreatment, and increased healthcare costs. An example of overmedicalization is the way dying has been affected by advances in medical technology and cultural shifts. This has resulted in the unnecessary use of intensive medical procedures for individuals at the end of life without any benefit to those individuals, and has led to an increase in deaths occurring in hospitals. Another term confused is disease mongering. Disease mongering is a concept closely linked with over-medicalisation, but it specifically refers to scenarios in which external influences, particularly the power and role of the pharmaceutical industry, actively promotes over-medicalisation so that they can generate new markets for their drugs. So let's have a look at some of those political wranglings that take place within a disease mongering example. To illustrate this, let's consider the case of premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which was introduced to the DSM-4 in 1994 as an extreme form of premenstrual symptoms. A drug called Sarafem was specifically developed and obtained FDA approval and was aggressively promoted to both healthcare professionals and consumers in the United States. However, it is important to note that Sarafem, granted FDA approval in 2001, was essentially a rebranded version of fluoxetine, which you may have heard of in the field of mental health. Coincidentally, Prozac, another medication containing fluoxetine, lost its patent protection in the same year, meaning that Prozac potentially became cheaper and they needed to sell a more expensive alternative. Essentially, Prozac becomes rebranded as fluoxetine and sold as a mental health treatment. This prevailing perception of untreated mental disorders leads to a heightened emphasis on intervention, often neglecting the potential for overdiagnosis and overtreatment. Emphasizing treatment as the primary response to mental disorders not only contributes to overdiagnosis and unsuitable treatment, but also diverts focus away from the social factors influencing mental health. So it's overemphasis of a medical model to the detriment of social models. Consequently, individuals facing social disadvantages are increasingly regarded as requiring treatment for their mental health issues instead of addressing the root causes such as poverty, food insecurity, and housing instability. And we've seen that previously in the chapter in Pilgrim and Rogers. In mental health, unlike cancer, overdiagnosis can happen when individuals do have symptoms, but the problem arises when the definitions of mental health disorders include symptoms that are often temporary or mild or are part of ordinary life experiences. These symptoms don't benefit from a medical intervention. For instance, many people experience feelings of sadness, insomnia, or fatigue at some point in their life. How useful is the label or the diagnosis in those cases? Overdiagnosis occurs not when these symptoms are absent, but when they are seen as signs of a disease and diagnosed in people for whom the diagnosis and treatment will cause more harm than good. Although overdiagnosis has significant drawbacks, there is a lack of substantial research into the subject, as we'll see. Additionally, we need effective methods to assess its prevalence. However, defining overdiagnosis is challenging, especially in the context of mental health, and this definitional uncertainty extends beyond mental health as well. In mental health, a notable challenge is the subjective nature of symptom reporting, assessment, and the interpretation of diagnostic criteria. Broderson et al. Have classified overdiagnosis into two types. Overdetection. This refers to the identification of asymptomatic individuals with abnormalities through testing. These abnormalities would not have caused symptoms or led to death because they would either have resolved on their own, not progressed, or progressed too slowly to cause harm. So we're acting a little bit too quickly in those cases, or we're not allowing people to right themselves and allow their social situation to change. The other one from Broderson et al. Is overdefinition. We discussed this in class last week. This happens when definitions of risk factors are broadened without clear evidence of enhancing quality of life or extending lifespan. It also occurs when disease definitions are expanded to encompass individuals with temporary or mild symptoms who wouldn't significantly benefit from the diagnosis in the first place. Such individuals wouldn't experience meaningful improvements in their symptoms or better management and coping, but could actually face adverse physical, social, psychological, and financial consequences as a result of the diagnosis. And we'll look at this later in stigma. Broderson et al. Have also outlined phenomena that are distinct from overdiagnosis, but are often confused in the literature within it. These include false positive test results. These occur when test results suggest possible abnormalities, but upon further examination, they are determined not to be the actual diseases or causes. Overtreatment. This takes place either in the context of overdiagnosis or more broadly when a treatment is administered for a correctly diagnosed condition, even though the best available evidence shows that the treatment doesn't provide any benefit. Overtesting. This involves excessive or unnecessary use of a medical test or screening test and using the test when it's not needed. Misdiagnosis. This occurs when an incorrect diagnosis is made instead of an accurate one, or when diagnosis is improperly assigned to a person who doesn't meet the standard criteria for any diagnosis. So we'll look at how the DSM is applied in another video and how certain criteria have to be met, and often in the case of mental health, not all the necessary criteria are met. So let's distinguish in more detail overdiagnosis from misdiagnosis. Due to the subjective nature of mental health diagnoses, there is some level of uncertainty at an individual level in distinguishing between overdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. It isn't always straightforward. Nevertheless, it's crucial to have a clear understanding of these concepts and apply their definitions accurately if we want to tackle overdiagnosis. In essence, overdiagnosis happens when diagnoses are correctly applied, but the problem is that the diagnosis itself is excessive. In contrast, misdiagnosis occurs when diagnoses are incorrectly applied, such as diagnosing individuals who don't meet the criteria for a mental disorder or diagnosing one mental disorder instead of another. Toombs et al.'s 2019 study is worth mentioning as it found, in the articles it examined, this was the literature on overdiagnosis, more than 75% of instances where the term overdiagnosis was used was actually related to misdiagnosis. This included cases where people were incorrectly diagnosed with a mental disorder that they didn't actually have, or where one mental disorder was mistakenly identified instead of another. Toombs et al. Point out that misdiagnosis is a significant concern in the field of mental health care. Understanding of overdiagnosis in mental disorders is crucial due to its potential for causing serious harms. These harms include social effects such as labeling, which can lead to stigma, affect insurability and employment, and also triggers nocebo effects resulting from negative health expectations. So nocebo is a play on the word placebo. So when a person thinks they have a medical conditions, a whole host of mental and social problems follow simply because the person thinks they have this negative condition. Additionally, overdiagnosis can lead to unnecessary exposure to medication side effects or unfavorable experiences with psychological treatments. It diverts mental health resources away from those who genuinely need them. Basically, the clinics are clogged up with people being treated at the expense of people who might genuinely benefit from the treatment. These harms occur without providing any health benefits to the overdiagnosed individuals. In fact, I'm going to say this again. It's very important. These harms occur without providing any health benefits to the individuals that have been overdiagnosed. Therefore, it's not a case of a balancing act that actually everybody loses, as we can refer back to the original quotation from Adamson in 1924. So, as I say, those are the references and the evidence that I drew upon making this video. I purposely didn't make reference to them as I went along in order to keep the video time down, but you might want to stop and pause at various points in the video if you want to make note of those references, or make notes of those references on this page and look into the points I've highlighted in some more detail. Thanks for listening.